Last Friday, my good friend Todd Terrazas gave me a call out of the blue, and it was so good to talk to him. Todd and I worked together. Actually, Todd worked for me back at this startup, and I think it was about 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago exactly. Todd and I were spending a lot of time in Iowa, attending trade shows, trying to decide if Iowa, the state of Iowa, would be a good market for this software product that we sold. We went to one sales call after another, and it became pretty clear that we were just a little bit late, which kind of went to a thought that I had concluded in making some phone calls a couple years earlier. That with a little bit of investment, I think we could have owned that state, but the company didn't want to put money in that direction. In fact, it was pretty clear by then that the company actually wanted to go in a different direction. And Todd and I spent a lot of time commiserating, trying to figure out what we could do. I remember one morning after we had left a coffee shop, we were driving, and Todd started to open up to me about his future. And this is an interesting thing, and I don't know if you found this to be true, but when you live with somebody like what Todd and I kind of had done on the road, when you actually spend a lot of time doing hard things with people, you get really close to them. Todd opened up that him and a friend of his had started a limited press apparel company, and they were making shirts and hats and all kinds of clothing, and he was very excited about that. And I was excited to hear about him starting that too. And with him being so honest, I couldn't help but to disclose a secret that I had, that I was starting a podcast, and that maybe that would be the start of me entering the business consulting space. Well, anyway, so here it is after all these years, and Todd is calling me up to express his condolences for the loss of my son, and I was deeply touched by this gesture. Todd and all you other people out here who've reached out to me and expressed their sympathies have been so supportive and so generous and so kind to me, and I can't help but feel grateful. In this deep sense of gratitude that I have, a sense of belonging, a deep sense of belonging that I'm not alone. And even more so, it solidifies this idea that we are all so interdependent, that none of us is as strong as all of us, which totally goes against this cultural notion of the individual, this Western idea of being the rugged individual and that you can do it all on your own, all by yourself, which I totally reject. Because the thing that has made this species, the human species, so successful on this planet is the fact that we collaborate together, that we work together, and that we look out for each other. And never in my life, during this period, this year, have I fully understood how true this is. And I'm so thankful to be surrounded by people that love me. One of the things that I do to promote awareness and mindfulness is that I write a daily journal. And I do it in the style of Epictetus. Epictetus was a Stoic philosopher. The Stoics believed that we need to live in accordance with nature. Well, Epictetus was actually an interesting guy. He was a Greek slave that was sold to Rome. He was actually able to befriend his master, the person that owned him, and he earned his freedom and became a very famous teacher, writer. He journaled. And what he did was he would ask himself 3 questions every day. The first question was, what did I do good today? What am I grateful for? And then the second question was, where did I miss the mark? What did I screw up? And then the third question was, what can I do to be the best version of myself? Well, the most important of those questions is the first one. What are you grateful for? And I go back through the day and I think about all the good things that happened. And it could be as simple as some good work that I finished, a good conversation, a great meal, a terrific cup of coffee that I had. It could be big things, it could be small things. And I believe every day we can find something to be grateful for. But we can only do it if we stop, look, and listen. And when we do that, we can find the everyday miracles that bring joy to our life. Now, not everything that goes on in our life goes as planned. But even things that go poorly may eventually turn out to be a good thing. I remember this one time. It was back at that same company, the software company. And I had a sales call with a school, with a high school. And I was given a demonstration of the software. And they would ask me a question, well, can it do this? And I would go, no, it can't. And then he'd ask me another question, can it do this? And I would go, oh, no, it can't. And well, how about this? And I would go, oh yeah, we can do this. And I would show them. And some of the functionality we could do, but not all the functionality. I was probably there an hour and a half. And I had a page and a half of notes written of things that we didn't do. And it was no surprise that I did not win that deal. They were very nice. But even though we didn't win the deal, you know what we got out of that? A roadmap on how to improve the software. It took us 2 years. But over time, we were able to put all that functionality into the software, all based on that one sales call that I had. That customer, potential customer, told us what we needed to do. Once we did that, we were able to earn we were able to earn clients just like them. But it never would have happened if I didn't show up and try to give those folks a demo. To be grateful is to see the possibility, to see opportunity, even when you think it may not be there. Back in 2020, my wife Denise was working for a school district down in central Illinois. And she was a principal of the school. And one day her and the superintendent had to pick up a kid. Now, back in those days, remember, everybody was doing social distancing and they were wearing masks and all that. And they followed all those rules. And it was like the next day after they dropped that kid off, the superintendent called up my wife and he said, oh, Denise, he goes, I got some bad news. My son just tested positive for COVID and I was with him last weekend. So immediately, they got sequestered. Immediately, they went and got tested. Now, back in those days, it was very hard to get tested for COVID. You had to go someplace. They would pass the swab into your car. You'd stay in the car, and then we'd give it to them. And it'd take a day or two before the test results came back. And every time she got tested, it came back negative. But she was starting to get a temperature, a serious temperature, and she wasn't feeling very good. And although it didn't say she had COVID, she felt like she had COVID. And in those days, too, you were supposed to wait at least 2 weeks from the first time that you were exposed before you returned to the public. Well, wouldn't you know it, that was bumping right into Thanksgiving. And back then, families weren't really having Thanksgiving together, if you remember. My kids are all over the place, so it would have just been Denise and I. And it was starting to look like maybe she and I were not going to have Thanksgiving. And I had bought all this food. I like to cook. I had turkey, and it was sweet potatoes, all this stuff. And I remember the day before, it took her a lot of work, but she got yet another test at a different place, different facility, and it came back negative too. And I'm like, Denise, you got to come home. She goes, well, we're not at that 2 week point. I'm like, oh, the heck with that. And she came home and never. And it is truly one of the most joyous moments of my life was when she came home. And we just cried and we laughed and we so enjoyed just being together that entire weekend. It was the most wonderful homecoming ever. Never have I been so thankful for a Thanksgiving. Many feel like we live in dark times. Do you? Now, I'm an amateur historian, and I could tell you these times are not nearly as dark as the 60s, as the Great Depression, the American Civil War, the Trail of Tears. We've had much more difficult times in the past. But it doesn't mitigate the fact that if you have that feeling, that sense of anxiety, that sense of fear, that's real. But again, I urge you, if you were just to stop, look, and listen, you can find the good in this moment, in this now. Anthony DeMello says, though everything is a mess, all is well. And tragically, most people don't get that. Most people don't wake up to the fact that we're never going to live in a perfect world. But there's things that we can do right now to bring some joy and peace and serenity in our lives. So instead of doom scrolling on your phone, watching Rome burn, instead reflect on a great meal that you had, some good music that you just listened to, some warm companionship, some jokes, some laughing, some goofing around that you did with your friends and family. Maybe the wagging of a tail or a sunset. And in my mind, these are the things that we need to be in a state of thanksgiving. It's been a struggle the last few weeks to figure out what to talk about here on this podcast. But I feel like maybe I'm getting there. For sure, one thing I am doing is I'm stepping up to the microphone every day. And I'm giving it a go. I'm giving it a try. And again, if it wasn't for the kindness of Todd and Sean and Vicky and Lauren and Rob and David and Tom, who've reached out to me to have breakfast or lunch or to give me a book, if it wasn't for the encouragement that I've gotten from these people who've listened to this podcast, listened to my last few episodes, and took a moment to reach out to me, I'm eternally grateful. Because it's been the catalyst to keep me moving forward. I'm starting. I'm just starting to figure this out. Well, what you've heard, does this spark some thoughts in you? Do you have something you want to share with me? An idea that maybe I should be looking into? If you do, I highly urge you to reach out to me, because I would love to have your advice. When people connect with me, it warms my heart. With that said, that's all I've got for today. Until next time, take care and have a highly successful and a profitable selling day.
This is a production of Habanero Media.